Breakthrough Real Estate Investing Podcast, episode 104.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Breakthrough Podcast. Hey, Sandy, how are you doing?
Fantastic. Yourself?
I'm doing really, really good. Really good. Don't ask me why. I just been, getting up early, getting stuff done, going to the gym, all that kind of stuff. So,
Well, we're
I guess
new year, right? New year, new you.
I don't follow that philosophy. I try to stay steady. Steady incline going up.
Yeah.
What's new with you?
Been on vacation, just got back, so I'm energized. Actually, I've been a couple days back, so I got over the tiredness of flying around and whatnot, and got a lot of energy. I'm excited to grind out some hard work for a while. We're in the Caribbean there. Actually went on a sailing trip, which I've never done before, which was really cool. Lived on a boat for about 7 days, and
Really?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
It was cool. It was neat. We had a friend of mine's into that. So he was our captain, and we sailed from port to port kind of thing, and had fun.
Like that sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
Would have been, I guess, rejuvenating.
Definitely rejuvenating. I'm got a lot of energy. I'm like you. I'm excited. I'm waking up early this week. I'm in the gym, feeling good, and ready to do some real estate business.
We're probably excited because we have such a great guest waiting in the background here, Andrew Hines.
Definitely could be part of it. Yeah.
Hey
absolutely.
guys.
Andrew Hines is with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning. And he's got one of those setups that his microphone, he just sounds like Howard Stern on there. He's got the...
Really? I just need a slightly deeper voice.
No,
I'll try and
I think you
boom it nice and deep here for you.
You got it going on. That sounds really good. So thanks for being here, Andrew. Appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thank you. I know we've been a long time coming. We've been trying to set this up, and I got to get both you guys on my podcast here.
It has been
as well.
The problem with your podcast, you do it the old-fashioned way where everyone has to be in the same room.
I know, but sometimes good things you got to wait for.
Yeah. We'll get there.
Well, I'll get into Andrew's bio here in a sec. Before we do that, I want to remind everyone to jump on over to iTunes. Actually, jump on over to our website, breakthrough.reipodcast.ca, first of all, and pick up anything you want there from our previous shows. We've got 103 to browse through and listen to, and also get our free report there, The Ultimate Strategy for Building Wealth Through Real Estate. And that'll get you on our email lists, get you updated on everything we're doing, and also you'll get an email every time we release a show.
And please, when you're there, leave a rating and review for the show. Right now, we have 267 ratings. Not all of them are 5 stars, but we're doing pretty good. 238 5-star reviews and a couple of new reviews to read through here. So I'm just going to grab a couple of them since the last show and let you know what people think. Now, I haven't even read these, so they could be good or they could be bad. Here we go. The push I needed. Niagara Rents says, and he gives it 5 stars and says, "Hey guys, great podcast. The wealth of information you guys have built here is amazing. You can pick and choose which episodes are relevant to you. Your podcast gave me the little push I needed to buy my first rental property. Thanks, guys." Thank you very much, Niagara Rents. Joel Demings says, "Learning so much, 5 stars. Yesterday, I had a chance to talk to Rob by phone. I was amazed that he returned my call and was so grateful for his sage advice. Started listening a month ago to the podcast, and my REI knowledge has grown exponentially. My wife and I are looking forward to growing our portfolio because of Breakthrough. Thanks, guys, and keep up the great work." Oh, that's great. Yeah, I call everybody back. Anyone who wants to give me a call, please do. I will definitely call you back. I love to help and love to talk. So let's see. Last one here. Jake Blades says, "Love the show. Hey guys, I love what you're doing with this podcast. Only started listening about a month ago, and I've already learned so much. Recently, I purchased my first home, and I'm very excited to keep learning before I delve deeper into the world of real estate investing. One request for a show topic I would like to make is if you could have someone on who is investing and has experience in Alberta to come on and talk about their story and some of the differences in the markets in cities like Edmonton, Red Deer, and Calgary." We had someone on from Red Deer, didn't we?
Red Deer? I don't think so. Did we?
I feel like we have. I'm sorry it's escaping me right now. But I feel like I'm not alone in the group of listeners out west here that would like to hear something more about this topic. Always, I look forward to your future shows, and thank you so much for what you guys do with this podcast. So I really appreciate all of those, and keep them coming, guys. I love seeing these new reviews, and they help us. They help us get guests like Andrew Hines on our show, who otherwise probably would have snubbed us. So keep them coming.
Segueing into Andrew, let's talk about Andrew. Andrew's a real estate investor from Burlington, Ontario, and he's primarily invested in student rentals in London, Ontario. As of the time of this interview, he's approximately 4 million in real estate holdings and is the host, like we mentioned, of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Andrew advocates the use of the BRRRR method to achieve financial independence and has become quite proficient in construction management, building and development due to his value-add approach to real estate investing. Andrew owns several companies, including a construction general contracting company, and has built out multiple investment property units in Southwestern Ontario while managing his own portfolio. So again, welcome to the show, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Yeah, welcome, Andrew. Thank you very much for being on. And I don't want to give anyone the impression that you're snooty. That was just a little joke there, of course. We've met several times in person, and you're a very nice, wonderful, gracious human being. So thank you for being on.
Same to you.
So let's jump right in. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started in real estate investing?
So I'll go right back to the beginning. So me as a kid, like growing up, my family, they weren't real estate investors, didn't, just own their own home. And I just remember my parents kind of struggled a bit, right? They didn't have all the money that they wanted. And I remember walking in on conversations where they were complaining or talking about how they couldn't afford things. And I at a younger age, I became committed to figuring out a better way of doing things. So I had my eyes open, figured I'd go get really educated, went to Western University in London, Ontario. And as I was there, I was seeing my friends paying rent in, these buildings right across from the gates. I worked out some rough numbers, and I figured out that the owner was making like $150,000 net, which I knew was like double what my dad's, salary was. I'm like, wow, okay. So all I need to do is own those four, and, I've replaced that income for life. So at that moment, I knew I was going to get involved, but I knew nothing. And so I went through business school, wanted to be an entrepreneur, didn't know where that was going to take me, didn't know how I was going to get there. So I ended up teaching right after I graduated. I taught at Western, teaching introductory business, first year course for 2 years. And when that contract ended, the stars aligned, and I ended up meeting my now wife, and we started talking. Her mom was a very established and is a very established real estate developer, investor. So I went to work for her as a mortgage agent, and I got into the industry in 2010. I started working with investors, helping them get financing, and it just, it got me thinking. And soon enough, I bought my first couple properties in that first year or two. Eventually, I realized I wanted more. I ran out of cash. So, the classic wall you hit when you just do buy and hold and don't add value. I didn't know how to add value to real estate at the time. But then I took a stab at trying to develop a property, take a house down and build a duplex, way more than I could chew at the time, failed miserably. Didn't end up doing that deal. So I finally got into my first student rental in 2015, and officially my first, and I renovated it. So I kind of set my sights on it. I had been watching some people. I had been seeing one particular investor making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars flipping these student rentals. So I knew the value was there. I didn't want to sell. I wanted to keep. I did end up selling a few of them as I was kind of gearing up and getting qualified to get mortgages on them. But that was where it started. So I started building additions, rejigging layouts. I learned how to be a general contractor, never ever thinking I would go down that road. But out of necessity, I just ended up there. I ended up doing that. And now I general contract for other people, investors. And again, never a place I thought I'd be, but I do my own projects. I do other people's projects. And it's just grown from there. So I know that was a long-winded version, but I just want to give you a bit of context there.
No, that's really good. And that's exactly what we're looking for, right? It's just a little background on where you started and why. Now you mentioned a couple of different strategies there, but let's just talk about the type of properties that you invest in. So can you tell us maybe your favorites and why?
Okay, so it's not all black and white like that. I could say, for one reason, I love student rentals. So student rentals are something where if the financial challenges of getting them financed didn't exist, I'd say that would be my absolute favorite property to invest in. Student rentals are a business, and it's not like family homes where you have a rent cycle that could be anywhere from some warm month to another warm month. Like students, there are specific times that matter, and if you miss them, it sucks. But if you hit them, if you know how to manage a student rental properly, or you have good management in place, the cash flow opportunities are fantastic. Economically, I feel that they're incredibly well hedged. So if you own a student rental, if the economy is up and it's in a boom, everyone wants to go to school to get into the market. If the economy is down and in recession, everybody goes back to school to get educated so that they can hopefully get a job in the market. So student rentals are kind of that perfect economically hedged investment, which I really loved. Like that was the thing that drew me to it, is knowing that I felt safer investing in that market from an economic standpoint. But then beyond that, just at face value, the cash flow is better typically. I know there's a lot of people out there that want to get in, and they're squeezing those cash flow margins, but it's still there at Western today. You could still go buy something in cash flow on a student rental right away.
So you mentioned adding value. So is that the kind of thing that you can do with a student rental, and how would you go about it?
Well, value from an investor standpoint is always about adding income, right? What can you do that will add income? Like, and not just like hopefully add income, like for sure add income. So in a student rental, adding a bedroom is adding value. I noticed that adding an ensuite bathroom to a bedroom could fetch me an extra $100 a month. And so I ended up trying that on a project in 2016. It was kind of a test to put ensuite bathrooms in a renovation project. And I built an addition. And I aimed to make it something that, like, when a student walked in, they'd be like, holy wow, like this is unreal. Like, get all excited about it. Be so excited about it, they'll tell all their friends that you guys got to see my place. I live in the nicest place in town. I wanted to do that. So at the time, I didn't know what I would get for rent. I figured I'd get $650 or $600, compared to $500, which you would have been able to get otherwise. Long and short, I started at a $600, and I eventually got that thing rented for $700 a bedroom on my next turnover. So the cash flow, I'll give you an example. That property alone, I was able to pull every dollar I had into it out. So my purchase price, all my renovations, on the refinance when I was done, I got everything out. And I did another property right after that, same summer, pulled almost every dollar out. I had like $6,000 or $7,000 invested in that. And so that was a summer where I acquired what is now worth maybe $1.3 million of properties with not a dollar of my own money. And that's why value add for me. That's why it's so important.
Mm-hmm. So now let's talk about that a little bit more, because you mentioned that it was difficult to get the financing for this type of thing. And I would imagine it's even more difficult to go back and refinance it after you're done. How do you go about that? Who are the lenders that will look at it, and what are they looking for? Like, because I would assume that clearly now you've taken something that I don't know what the place is to begin with, but let's just say it looks like a single family home when you take it over. And then now you're adding bathrooms to every bedroom, and clearly it's not a single family home anymore.
Well, that's a great point. And that is sometimes, that is some feedback I've had from appraisers when they've gone out. I've heard that come back to the lender. Oh, the appraiser's concerned, wanted it to be still want it to be a functional home. But kid you not, there are brand new houses in Hamilton right now with ensuite bathrooms in every bedroom. So it's not an entirely unique concept, even for families. But what I would say there is, from a financing standpoint, yes, you still have to make it function as a normal home. So it's got to have a living room. It's got to have a proper kitchen. A couple extra bathrooms aren't going to hurt you, but you do need to have everything that a normal home is going to have. But yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to do a Frankenstein house. I'm trying to do really, really nice house that satisfies the needs. As far as who will finance them, I'll tell you my approach first. My approach was I saw a lot of people doing these deals. Like I saw them selling like 100 in a year, like 100 projects in a year in this particular area of London. So I was watching it and I'm like, well, if somebody else can do this, I can do this. So I started calling. I was looking up who owned the properties and I started calling the owners. I would Google them, see if I could find them. I found a couple of dentists and lawyers that were buyers of these properties. And I called them and I said, hey, who did your financing? And they were like, oh, it was this guy, or it was referred to me by my realtor. So I'd speak with that realtor. And by doing that, I not only found a source for financing that was doing these deals, I found potential buyers for product that I wasn't going to be able to keep too. And so it was, asking questions and digging is absolutely critical. I really want to stress that, like, just because you don't have the answer, like pick up your phone, do a Google search, call people, you will get an answer. And that's how I did it. So it's not like I can tell you that CIBC is going to do these deals, but I found a guy at CIBC that could get it done. Did many for me. Huge factor in creating wealth for me was this one person. He created so much wealth for me. Another person at RBC. So I had a connection to private banking at RBC, and I called the lady and she's like, no way, never. Like, I can't believe you'd even bring this to me. Like, she didn't say it in those words, but she was so rude. And I'm like, you're private banking? You're supposed to be like nice and friendly and treat me like gold. Not so. So anyways, then I find another RBC guy. Like, I just asked around investors I know, and I got a name of a guy. And so I gave him a call, and he's like, yeah, we can do that. It's case by case. Well, sure enough, he got me a deal done. So I'll hear people tell me you can't finance student rentals. And you know what? I used to believe that. I worked in the financing industry, and everyone would come to me with a student rental. And the only way they were getting done is if you're sneaking them through as if they were completely just family homes. And, it was frustrating to me. And I'm like, I don't want anything to do with that. So it was key. Seeing other people doing it and then finding out who they were using was what saved me, what allowed me to do that strategy. And now it's just about taking it to the next level. Like, I'm seeing what a lot of investors are doing now to get things financed. And I can tell you, to take the issue away with student rentals, what you can do is you can just go commercial financing. So rather than go to your regular residential person at BMO or Scotiabank, you can actually ask to speak to their commercial financing department. And even if you have single family homes, their only requirement is that you have a total of 5 doors or more. And now they'll treat you as a portfolio, and they'll allow you to finance individual properties, and you can just add. So you can just keep acquiring properties and just keep adding them to your portfolio. And that is subject to an annual review. So they're going to ask you to see your financial statements every year and make sure you're keeping your ratios in line. But there's basically a recipe where more is better. When it comes to those type of lenders, they're like, give me more. We want a bigger portfolio. We want you to do more deals. Very opposite to the way residential lending typically is.
Yeah, it makes sense though, because the more that you have, the more that's in your portfolio, the more leverage that, they have basically against you.
To make sure you stay in line. They're exposed too, right? But I think the key is, like, if you're playing ball, because they review you regularly, right? So if they see that you're playing ball, you're abiding by their requirements, why wouldn't they want to give you more loans? So you just need to be effective at adhering to their requirements, which is really debt service. So I'm not sure if your listeners are going to be familiar with this, but debt service ratios, typically a lender wants you to have your income 1.2 times your total debt service. And
okay, go a little deeper into that then.
Well, the debt service would be your mortgage, basically. So operating income is basically, we start with your rents, we take off vacancy, we take off maintenance, management, utilities, snow plowing, garbage removal, anything you do on your property, anything that's going to show up in your financial statements, more or less. And then, so once you have that number, you subtracted all that stuff off, that's your operating income. So it's before your mortgage. So then you're going to compare. So say your operating income is $40,000 and your total debt service for 1 year, which is 12 mortgage payments, is $35,000. Well, you could work that quick math. I think we're around 1.2 or 1.15. 1.2 is generally the requirement. Sorry, did that help? Like, I know it's
Yeah, no, it does. It really does. And I mean, people can go back and listen to it again, right? If they want to understand it a little bit better.
Yeah. And if they want to, I know you'll give my contact at the end. Like, I have a spreadsheet that calculates that. So if somebody wants to reach out to me, I can try and make that available for them.
There you go.
Cool. Andrew, walk us through your deal analysis process. How do you decide whether or not a property is worth adding to the portfolio or not?
Well, the first check, which I'm sure you guys are the same, is location, right? So for students specifically, talking about that, I look for, am I near an arterial road that runs right into campus? So at Western, and every university is different. Like, I don't believe that just because this works for me at Western, it would work at another university. So you really do need to look at your specific market. But at Western, there's the east side of campus, which is highly desirable to live. There's the west side, which is sort of up and coming. No one used to want to live there, but it's becoming more and more popular. And the key thing is, if you're going to be on the west side, you've got to be like close to a bus stop. And I actually will look, and I'll make sure that the students can walk to the bus stop in 4 minutes or less. That's a big thing. 5 minutes is fringe. I might still look at something that's 5 minutes, but I like to be able to, when I show my properties, I like to actually be able to say, hey, look, and if you look just right over there, that's the bus stop. And you can actually just point at it. They can see how close they are. So if I'm not within walking distance, I want to be able to see the bus stop from the front porch. That's most ideal. Otherwise, you will get pushback from students. They will say, well, we like the place, but it's just a bit far. Like, some of the roommates are having trouble. To me, that was just never something I wanted to own long term. So if I was going to end up in that standpoint, don't like that. Don't typically want to get into that. So what do I look for beyond that? If I know my location's good, I'm looking for something either that's already been renovated, or at least, I know the plumbing is modern ABS. The electrical is definitely, at least ungrounded copper. Hopefully it's, modern wiring with grounded copper. If it's not, then I have to start looking at, can I add the value to this property? And you know what, more realistically, I'm a value add guy. Like, I'm not just buying to buy and hold. I'm looking for a property that I can buy, renovate, add some sort of value to in some way, and pull every dollar I have out and cash flow. Like, that's the simple answer. Every dollar. If product can satisfy those things and is in a good location, I'm pretty much in. And obviously that's challenging, which is why, I am picky about deals, but that's the main thing. And then, beyond that, like, we could dig deeper into the specific cash flow numbers, but that's really it. If I got the cash flow, I know in Ontario that we have a housing crisis coming. Real estate is going to go up. So my main initiative here, one of my main initiatives, is to just get my name on a lot of real estate, to get my name on a lot of stuff. But, key requirement to be able to sleep at night is that my account is constantly building every month and not shrinking every month.
Some challenges. We're going to talk about some challenges that you've overcome and faced. Obviously, everyone's got some challenges you faced, and what are some that you've gone through, and how have they helped you move forward?
One challenge that happened is I basically had a deal come across, and this was back in like 2013. It was a house, and I ended up having an opportunity to go to basically buy a lot, tear it down, and build a duplex. And I was way too green at the time. Took a shot at it, and basically, here's what happened. The neighbors found out what I was going to do, and they called the site plan office in the city hall, and the city hall told them, this is the blueprint, this is the proposed drawing, and basically they didn't like it, and they called me a big bad Toronto developer. I made the newspaper. I seem to recall being on the front page of the London Free Press with 40 people standing on my property's front lawn, saying, "Not in our backyard, don't keep us in the dark." And it was this moment where I thought, I had like CTV calling me, wanting to do an interview, calling me the big bad Toronto developer, trying to destroy the neighborhood, basically take the character out of the neighborhood. And I had this attitude like, this is silly. Like, I can't believe this is happening, but I'm not going to talk to you guys. I'm not doing an interview. Like, I'm not going to go, city councilors calling me. I'm not going to do any of that. And I realized what a horrible mistake that was. If I had just shown them who I was, a young guy, trying to create value in a neighborhood, And rather than this big bad guy that just wants to destroy a neighborhood, it could have gone a lot differently. But what happened is they passed an interim control bylaw, sneaky, very sneaky stuff. Which basically meant all construction, all permits were halted for 1 year in that neighborhood. And then simultaneously, they instituted a neighborhood character study for heritage. So they started investigating the neighborhood's historical significance, which I can tell you this entire neighborhood is wartime houses that are sinking because they're built in a floodplain and they were done with improper footings. So like most of that neighborhood needs to be torn down. It should not be considered historically significant. But because people are emotional and the neighbors were emotional, they petitioned their city councilor to get that pushed forward, and they could find, there's some heritage element there, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't have gone through, but it's very unreasonable and irrational in my opinion. But I just didn't handle it well, So the long story turned short there is that no development was able to happen, and that property ended up being held by my would-be partner for 4 years until we were in a position to sell it and just recoup. But that was headaches for years created by my own sort of recklessness, getting into something that was ill-advised, that wasn't wasn't something that I had the skill set at the time or the expert help at the time. And if I had had it to do again, well, for one, I would have sought better advice and probably never would have even attempted it, because I don't think it was an ideal project. So it's probably a blessing in disguise. But, what that taught me, like if we want to transition into how that helped me, is that you really need to mitigate your risks when you're trying to develop or trying to construct or even just trying to renovate. And you need to understand who has a say in what you do. Like if you're asking for a minor variance on your property, I'm not sure if your listeners will be familiar with this, but a minor variance is basically when, say, you want to add a second parking space, but the zoning bylaw says you can't have, 2 parking spaces side by side or something like that. Every municipality is different. Then you would have to go in and apply, and you have a chance that the neighbors come out and say, no, we don't like that. And they can influence the decision of the committee of adjustments. So you might not get approved. And if you're ever in a position like that, and this is part of my analysis, so we'll kind of build it into that, I now look for a plan A, B, and C. Like if my plan A hinges, like if I need, in order to be successful, if I need plan A to work, that's probably a bad deal. So plan
like
A,
if you need a variance, you're saying in order for plan A to work.
yeah, exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, no.
Yeah.
So say I'm only profitable if plan A works and I need a variance.
Right.
That's not a deal I'm doing. That's not a deal I'm doing. So
Agreed.
I'd look at a deal where, best case scenario, I can get a variance, or I can get a zoning change, or I can get approval to add a unit. That's plan A. That's like exceptionally profitable. In plan B, I'm looking, what can I do, refinance and still cash flow, or, be at a break even cash flow, or, something. I would ideally like plan B to still be a profitable, highly advantageous option. And then plan C, in a worst case, break even, but I'm still okay. So there's no scenario where I'm feeling like I just, it's gonna negatively impact me financially. So call me careful. I probably do less deals because that's my approach. But going through what I went through, and I didn't even mention this before, but at the same time as that whole development thing was blowing up, my situation in the US was blowing up because I bought a couple of rental properties down there. And one of them got destroyed, gave it away. It cost me like $40,000. So this was all happening to me all at once. And it was like just the perfect storm of everything going wrong. All of my mistakes, all of my, my naivete to do with being, younger and inexperienced, all collapsing on me all at once. Just made me careful. It made me really careful. It made me stronger.
So let's talk about why you didn't just quit then. What made you not quit? Oh, is that right?
I did for a while. Yeah. As the dust settled, I was about a year and a half of just like not even paying attention to real estate. I still had my 2 properties. I had the one in Ohio still. The other one I gave it away for free. And that was actually a blessing. I was told that I was going to have to pay somebody to take it, or I would have to pay to demolish it and then give it back to the city. That was kind of where I was at. So I was fortunate that the property manager that didn't do a good job ended up actually taking it from me. So, maybe that was part of his plan. But anyways, so I got out of that, and okay, sorry, to go back to your question, I don't want to breeze over it. Could you repeat it?
Was just like, what made you not quit? Why did you stick with it?
Okay. So as that was all happening, I basically said, I can't handle this. Like I had like a nervous breakdown. I put my attention elsewhere for a while. I looked at kind of just focusing on the mortgage business, doing some other stuff and just saying I'm out. And a couple of years passed, and what got me back in is probably the better question, is that my friend was just crushing it. Like we had been friends since 2010. We both graduated from Ivy at the same time. And he was just a very aggressive real estate investor. And every time I talked to him, he's like, oh yeah, I just did another $100,000 profit flip. Or I just did, I added this many properties to my portfolio. I'm like, wait a minute, why did I get out of this game? Like just because I got hurt and just because I lost doesn't mean I need to be a loser. And I just said, you know what? Okay, I'm going to find a way to do this. And that was when I started calling everybody. I said, you know what? If I'm going to do it again, I'm not going to get burned again. I'm going to be smart. I'm not going to make the mistakes. I'm not going to expose myself. And those lessons, like I said, they made me call every single person, know the lender I was going to work with, know if I was going to sell a property, who I was going to work with. And then when I was dealing with contractors, they made me watch them like a hawk. From that day forth, when my property manager basically had stolen my money, took my property for free, and that was like a blessing to me, all that stuff happened. I knew that I needed to control things. So friend of mine, you might know him. He's got the TV show Everyday Investor, Rav Tour. He always says knowledge mitigates risk. Well, I think I said to him, I had him on my podcast. I'm like, Rav, it's not just that, knowledge and control. So yeah, one thing to know, the other thing is to control. And to assume anyone knows to assume anyone's looking out for my interests like I would look out for my interests would be naive. And I just realized that no longer exists. A turnkey property that's truly hands-off doesn't exist. You can be mostly turnkey, but I just learned that I'm going to have to take care. I'm going to have to be careful. And I followed my friend's lead and I have a couple of really good mentors that, thank God for them. I got back in the game. I got back in. And when I got back in, I was way more successful than I was the first time around. And I moved way faster.
And, I think you touched on a bunch of things there, but the one that really, I think, sticks with me the most is just knowing the highest and best use and the permitted use for the property, right? Especially, I think that's one of the key things. And you mentioned floodplain there. Mm-hmm. So those are a bunch of things that will hold you up. And I would agree 100% on not counting on getting the variance, because all it takes is that neighbor who just will not quit. I always say, like, if there's a chance of you getting a no to whatever you want to do with it, if there's even a chance, then don't even bother.
Well, unless you know that no is okay, right? Is no okay? Because if no isn't okay, then don't do it. Like, look at my Ohio example. The only way that worked, this was a market that was depressed. It was losing population every year. I bought a property for $12,000, bought another one for $13,000. The only way it was profitable is if everything went smooth, minor renovations got done quickly, tenants went in, and I got cash flow. There was no strategy to sell. Like, say I didn't like the property manager that I had lined up with before I got down there. I could try other ones, but I didn't know anyone else. And there's no guarantee that they'd be any better. Like, what if I don't like the tenant demographic? When I sold the other house that there was really not even that much wrong with, because of the way their transfer system works, I basically got half my investment back. So how I cash flowed for a few years. So that one, at least I think probably broke even in the grand scheme, but I didn't have a good plan A, B, and C. So yeah, like again, yeah. So you were saying, if no is a possibility, I truly do look at that. So I'll give you a success example. Knowing some of this lesson, I found a property in that same heritage neighborhood years later. And the heritage bylaw basically meant that no one else was looking at that neighborhood. They all knew you can't do anything. If you had wood siding, you cannot take that wood siding off and put vinyl. That was the rule. You can't change anything. Can't take wood windows out and put vinyl in. Couldn't do any of that. So I found a property that already had vinyl everything. I went in and talked to the heritage commissioner or the heritage planner. I basically pulled all these strings and worked out all these things. This was a power of sale property I found on Kijiji. And it was the most profitable deal I've ever done. I bought the property conditionally, and this guy did not want to do it, but I agreed to give up half my deposit if I didn't close. But I had already spoke with the heritage planner and he gave me a 99% yes, like 99% yes, 1% no. He's like, I can get this done. So I'm like, okay, risked about $7,000-8,000 plus the deposit. So yeah, it would have been maybe around $10,000 to risk, with a possibility. I knew there was a possibility of earning about $100 plus thousand on the deal. I got the yes. We tied it up, got the yes, ended up closing the property. It basically, we bought it for, my business partner and I and our company, we bought it for $215,000 and sold it for $600,000 after we were done renovating, just short of a year later. So it was about a $200,000 reno.
Okay, so it was a flip. And that's
that one was a flip. That was in a company. Yeah, I had a company for flipping, and that one was in the company.
And that was the plan right from the get-go with that one, was flip.
Yes. Yeah.
So what was it that you were looking for a yes on? Because we didn't touch on that. You just said you were looking for a yes. So what was it you were trying to do?
Would they allow me to build an addition? The only way this house, it was wonky floors, up and down. It needed some structural fixing. I had to flatten out the floors a bit on the inside, but then I also needed to extend back, and I needed to be able to add a couple of bedrooms. When I asked, they're like, you can't go up. You can't change the line of the house. So you have to follow the existing line of the house. So if I'm looking at it from the street, the house is absolutely no different. That was the criteria. So it was kind of a bit of a challenging situation, but I looked at it and I, talked to my engineer, and we both thought it was possible. And since it was already vinyl, I'm like, that's easy. I can keep the vinyl. Like, I'll just use the vinyl siding. We'll just continue it on. And it was just the perfect opportunity that it was already vinyl siding. It was already vinyl windows, aluminum door, asphalt shingles, all the modern things you would want, so that I wasn't restricted. And he said, sure enough, yeah, I don't see any problem. We'll allow you to do this.
Okay, man, we could talk about that all day, but I guess we'll move on, because I want to go into the whole question of, well, I mean, clearly whoever put the vinyl siding on didn't get a permit to do it in the first place or any of that, right?
Well, it's timing though. It was timing though, because the bylaw didn't come into effect until like 2013.
So they'd done
heritage
it
control.
that.
So if they had done it before, it was just a done deal. So in that neighborhood, it's so short-sighted, but this is the way the average homeowner is. The whole NIMBYer, not in my backyard. They think, oh, development, that's bad. But what they don't realize is, on average, they probably discounted their property by 25% of what it would be worth, or more. Could be 25 to 50% on average discount in that neighborhood, because you cannot change things.
Mm-hmm.
And so many houses literally just need to be torn down. Like, there's just no hope for them.
Those people, and I know the type of neighborhood, and those people aren't moving anyways until they're carried out of there. So It doesn't matter to them.
Yeah. I feel like that neighborhood will come back. I think they're going to undo that decision at some point. We'll see.
We'll see.
Multiple exit strategies. That was the biggest thing there, I think, for me. And then just ABC, have multiple ways out, because you're right. You're screwed if plan A doesn't work. Obviously, a lot of renovation strategies, a lot of very successful BRRRR strategies. What are the biggest things that you look for? What are the biggest things that other people should look for and be aware of when working with contractors in these renovation projects?
Well, be careful of general contractors is the first thing I'll say. I have never used a general contractor, which might sound odd. I've always subcontracted everything myself, my HVAC guy, my plumbing guy. And how did I find them? I used my phone. I used the internet. I used other investors in my network. So using a general contractor, the challenge is there's not full disclosure of profitability. On the contractor side, there's not full disclosure of how extras work, when changes are needed, what's going to happen. So depending on the scope of your project, if you surround yourself in, like, we have local investor meetups where there's contractors that do duplex conversions all day long. Like, they do it for like 5 or 6 different investors in the room. If you're working with somebody like that, then you're pretty much going to be guaranteed to know what you're getting into. Like, if you're just copying another investor using the same contractor, similar style house, you're probably not going to have any problems. So reputation with a GC, general contractor for short. So reputation with a GC would be the most important thing. Like, I cannot overstate that. Look for people who are getting jobs. If you need to go drive around the neighborhood and see where a general contractor is working, go drive up to the house, find out who owns it, talk to the owner and ask them about their experience. If you see a sign sitting on a lawn, go knock on the door, say, hey, it looks like you just used, contractor XYZ. What'd you think? Did you have an experience? Would you recommend them? Would you use them again? Did they stick to their budget? Clarity of the items, like an itemized invoice versus we'll do the project for $5,000 written in an email that doesn't even have a proper signature in it. That's the level of sophistication of some people that operate out there. And you got to watch out for that, because what kind of variance do you have? I mean, what kind of leverage do you have with a contractor? When I was working with contractors early on, I would be very, very careful not to assume that they were looking out for my best interests. And I don't think that anyone should do that. Don't assume anything. Don't assume that somebody's going to do a good job because they say they will. Don't assume they're going to show up and get it done in 3 weeks because that's what they said. Almost no one who says something's getting done in 3 weeks gets it done in 3 weeks. It's the default is if they say 1 week, plan for 3. I see it all the time. So you have to know the difference between what you're told and what's real, and be able to plan for the worst case. So they're telling me, $100,000 renovation. Have you spoke with their other clients? What was the difference between what they were told and what they got? Like, do not hire somebody unless you know somebody else that's hired them, or you have a specific referral that you can trust. It's roughly the equivalent to picking a tenant and not getting a landlord reference. Like, you need to do your digging, do your research, because I would say probably it's 90-10, 90% probably wouldn't be a good fit for you to work with. 10% maybe. So do your homework is my number one. Not everyone's going to be their own general contractor like I've been. But I don't think it's a bad idea. It's just time consuming. Like, I've done that. I have swung the hammer myself, but that's not my skill. It's really, my skill is with my phone. Anytime I'd find myself pulling out a tool, I'm like, this is really bad use of my time because I'm not good at this. So I would just call people. If I didn't have the right person on site, I'd call, find another one. And until I got my projects done. But early on, that's a bad way of doing things. That's a good way to get an inferior product. So I would just say, focus on your networks, find people that have done what you want to do, find out who they used, approach finding your contractors that way. You will reduce headaches. It won't eliminate them, but it will definitely reduce them. One other thing I would suggest, and it's related, would be to get into the industry in some way. I know both you guys ended up becoming realtors after being investors. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Think about how much you learn being in the industry. Like, I got into mortgages. I learned so much. I know guys that got into appraising, got into working at the bank, got into something related. It can help you. I'm not saying everyone needs to do that, but it's just how fast you want to learn. How fast do you want to improve your skills? There are alternatives, right? You can pay a coach. You can go work under somebody for free. You can go to networking meetups, but a once a month meetup, in my opinion, is not enough. I mean, now though, like, with podcasts like yours, and all the content that's out there, like, the learning curve is being reduced, but there's still, you can't learn this stuff overnight. So I think regular exposure, however you can do it, getting around stuff is absolutely critical.
Let's just touch on one thing before we move on from this renovation piece.
Yeah.
So you're being the general contractor in that you would go out and you would find each of the sub trades to come in and do the job. So let's talk about that same flip that we were running through earlier. Okay. So for something like that, it sounds like it was pretty intensive. You more or less gutted it. Is that?
Yeah, not completely, but I mean, yeah, there was a lot of work done. It was a pretty intense job. So we did have.
So sorry. So let's talk about who does what then in that scenario. So you have like, how many different people are you working with on a project like that?
It does depend, because like, I'll give you an example. Like, on a project, I'll have my plumber, my HVAC, my electrician. I will have a drywaller. I will have a roofer. Usually I'd have, so for my typical model was to have a full-time carpenter that worked for me, and he would be my site supervisor as well. So he would basically frame the addition. He'd work with some couple of general laborers that I'd put with him, and they'd be the same ones that would stuff the insulation. Sometimes they'd be the ones that do my trim and door. However, depending on how much trim and door there was to do, I would just go to a trim and door installer, like somebody who does finished carpentry, and they would put on the door handles and all that stuff. I'd have a painter. I'd have a cabinet supplier and installer. So they'd do the cabinet supply and install. I'd have my own granite company that would come in and measure up and do the install, appliance supplier. So I do try and get it out to many different people, but what I've found is really helpful is having really skilled people that can do all the in-between jobs. So I don't consider framing an in-between job, but my additions on those type of properties were built on concrete piers. So a good carpenter can do concrete piers in the ground. So I don't need to bring in a forming company. So we'd rent an auger. We'd rent an auger, and we'd drill our holes into the ground. We'd put our sono tubes in, pour the concrete. The carpenter would lead all of that work, and then build the addition, frame it up, tie it into the existing building. We'd call the roofer. They'd shingle up the addition. So there's a lot of moving parts. My time was spent a lot on the phone, making sure people would show up on time, because to me, as an investor borrowing expensive money, I'm looking at it saying I need to get to refinance as soon as possible, because every day right now with this expensive money, like on one of my projects, I worked it out to be like over $400 a day in burn. So it can cost a lot of money if you're using private money completely. And to me, timing is just absolutely critical, especially in the student game, because I'd be getting stuff where I had students signed up to rent the place out in September 1st, and I would be taking possession of the property on April 30th or May 1st. So May 2nd, work starts. I've got just under 4 months to be completely done my renovation and be ready for kids to move in.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are pluses and minuses of doing it that way. I would definitely say that is maybe something that most people might want to do after they have went through the process a couple of times with a general contractor, possibly, or try to take on something a little bit smaller to begin with.
Sure. You know what? I think in hindsight, like just looking at the quality of my earlier product, like I just feel like I would never want to do that again. I would want it to be better. And not saying that anyone else would notice. I'm a perfectionist, so I just don't like it. I want anything with my name on it to be fantastic. So I would say work with a good GC, right? Like it's never been easier, Rob. Like you've got the meetup, I think out your way, Quentin does a meetup there. You can get around a room full of people that are using good general contractors. I didn't know about that back when I did this. And you know what? Had I could have done things differently. Maybe I wouldn't have. Because I did do it very cheap. So, that's one thing, right? It was getting started. It was something I needed to do maybe to get started.
Goals. Let's move on to goals and your own goals for your business, real estate business, and anything else for the next 5 years. What are you working on? What are you going to achieve?
Well, I do have a few goals that I'm focused on, but the big ones are, like I want to double my cash flow in my portfolio in this next year. I do feel like that's possible. I feel like there's an exponential, performance curve as you kind of learn more and do more and connect with more people. There's a way to do that. So I'm looking to double my cash flow this year, which means I'm going to have to get into some larger buildings, multiple units at once, get some efficiencies. I've really been working on that. I've noticed that, because of how involved I am in my projects, they take a long time, a lot of my time. So I'm going to be trusting general contractors more. Just because I haven't done it doesn't mean I won't. It's just been something where I felt like I needed to learn. So that's one of them. I am looking to create $1 million in income between all my activities this year. So be it, properties I flip in my company, be it the construction business, be it, everything in between, including my rental income. So these are aggressive goals. Don't get me wrong. Like it's not because I've done it before that I'm making these goals. It's because I haven't done it. And, if you don't set a goal, you don't get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shoot for the moon and get halfway there is better than shooting for halfway there and getting a quarter. Yeah. I like it. Now, Andrew, you are a podcast host yourself.
Mhm.
You have your very own podcast where you talk to people in the real estate industry and also other investors. Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast started just because a friend of mine just told me I was a little chatty Cathy, I guess, when it came to things I was interested in, and we always would talk real estate. He's like, "Man, you should start a podcast." So I had listened to some Gary Vaynerchuk and realized I needed to get out there. I'd been hiding under a rock, didn't build my network, people didn't know me, and I'm just like, why am I doing this? I've done some interesting stuff, like stuff that if I could teach my younger self, I would have been interested. So I decided to start it, was putting out like 2-3 episodes a week initially, realized I could by no means keep that up. And I eventually kind of settled on a once a week kind of podcast. And yeah, we're just bringing guys on that, can drive to me because it's an in-person thing. Everything from guys that do BRRRRs, which has been a big part of my model, to people who are into development, people who are, crushing 300 properties this year, or aiming to, developers, everything in between. So all the things that I have questions on, it's just hey, show up and I'm going to ask you every question I got. And I love connecting with other investors, and if I were to go to a networking meeting, these are the questions I would ask. So why not just do it in front of a camera, was my thought.
Awesome. And it is called
the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast.
Nice. And people can find that on iTunes.
Yeah, you can find it everywhere podcasts are listened to. It's on YouTube as well, Spotify, all the above. Just type in Andrew Hines. My last name is spelled Hines, and you will find it. I'm
not sure if you guys do this all the time, but I've seen the highlights of your of a bunch of your podcasts. They always pop up on Facebook, I think. Yeah. Most of the time is where I see them. And you're really into these numbers. Like we don't delve too much into the actual numbers for specific deals that people have done too much on this show. But I noticed that you guys are really into that there. And I always wonder, how the heck are you so quick with this? You go, oh, well, that's a 130% return on investment rate there, buddy. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. And they go, what? No, I didn't know that. And then you explain to them how you came to that. So I always thought that was pretty impressive.
That's funny, Rob. I think that's good video editing. It wasn't that quick in person, but I chop out the dead space in between. But yeah, so we do dive into the numbers. You know what? There's a chronology to it. So early on, I was just fascinated by these other BRRRR investors. So the buy, rent, refinance, rent, repeat. I was fascinated by the guys that would go in and pull money out and put it in their pocket. Like I loved hearing stories about people who would, in fact, actually, Sandy, I just had Mike Johnson on the show, and he was talking about that he put $100,000 in his pocket. Loved it. So early on, I just dig into those numbers, and that was like the first 10 episodes were really just educating on the concept of BRRRR and getting in, digging in hard. And then I kind of got less into the numbers into the weeds kind of approach. And now it's more conceptual, right? Like although every once in a while I'll still dig in and, let's go through. So I have some basics that I like to do, go through what is your net investment after you refinance with the bank. So, say you're in for $50,000 after you've done your renos, refinanced. Okay. So what's your cash flow? $5,000 a year. What's your principal pay down? I usually assume 3% a year, principal pay down on your mortgage. So I add that number up, and then I assume a 3% appreciation rate, depending on the area. So you add those things all up, you divide them by your net investment. We've got stories of people making 60% return on investment, 100%, infinity when they got paid. It's nothing's better than when you get paid by the bank to keep a property. That is just the best. So.
Yeah, they're still happening too.
They are, right? You just got to get creative, right? I mean, you guys must see this all the time in your business. I love what you do because not only do you have the podcast, every day you're working with investors. You guys are talking shop every day. And I think that's just a fantastic recipe for success. It's
definitely fun. I wouldn't give it up.
No.
We were at an REI meeting. Now that you mentioned it, it was Durham REI, the one out here by Quentin D'Souza. And one of the speakers was there asking, okay, Now, who's in a job, like write down the percentage of things you do a day in your job that you love. And I wrote down 50, and I'm looking around and they were asking for answers and everyone else saying 10, 15. And I'm like, wow, I'm in a job where 50% of what I do, I love. Like, how can I ask for more? Still, I was like, how can I get it to 100? But that being said, 50 looked pretty good at that time. So yeah, I enjoy every minute of it, just being around investors. And, you know, Sandy and I both, for the most part, focus on investor clients, and all it does is help us with our own stuff.
Yeah, because you're constantly talking shop, right? Like you're asking that investor, you're trying to plan for them as if it was you, right? And now that's in your knowledge bank forever, that this is a way you can do a deal. Man, that's awesome.
And sometimes it hurts because people will ask me, Rob, like, you know, knowing what we know now about this, what do you think about it? No, man, you got to let it go. Sometimes that's the answer, right? So, but you know, support of the people around us, I think, is the more important thing. So anyway, we got just a couple more questions. We could have probably almost done a double episode because I wanted to drag some of these other areas out more than we did, but let's move on. We always like to ask for what the guest thinks is the best piece of advice that they could share with somebody just starting out in real estate. So for you, you've given us a bunch already, but you know, what's one that sort of stands out to you?
Well, I mean, okay, so the immerse yourself thing I talked about before, just dive right in, get to the meetups. You're going to spend time sitting in the rooms early on learning, but you know what? The best learning, people always say the same thing to me. The best learning at any meetup is getting out into the hallway and talking with the other investors. So that's one part of it. Listening to the Breakthrough podcast, Off the Hook, going back to my podcast, right to the early episodes and going right through the nuts and bolts. I know Matt McKeever, give him a shout out. Like his first, you know, handful of videos were teaching basic real estate concepts. The information's out there. Like you're gonna have to go full out if you are serious about this, because there's so many people out there that don't have money, right? They're not bringing money to the table. They have their job and they don't have anything else. All they have is hustle, and hustle isn't enough to do a deal. You got to have hustle and knowledge. So if you lack in that area, or money and qualification. So those are the things that, you know, if you're going to attract a joint venture partner or what have you, you got to have those things. So if you don't have the knowledge, you got to go get it. And you might have to hustle really hard to do that. But that'll help. That, you know, so I think that's a big one. But the knowledge is out there. Take it in. And like I said, so the other thing, if you want to accelerate it, you can look at getting into the industry. You can look at being a realtor. It will help you. Is it necessary? No. Did I do that? No. But I mean, I did get into mortgages and it did teach me a bunch.
You know what I've heard people say, and I often think that they're lying. This is just sort of a thing that people say, is they say, you know, real estate is a means to an end for me. I don't enjoy real estate. It's, you know, I know it. I've figured out how to capitalize on it, how to do my strategy, whatever, but it's just a means to an end. But I find that a lot of people who are into this love it, just love it. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that they're going to go out and they're going to buy a house because they need to buy a house. They're still going to exercise, you know, the best way of making money in the market that they're in. So that's one of the things that I always thought was kind of odd. But when you're talking about going out and finding the information and learning, it's not hard for someone whose heart is in it. Right. You can eat that up all day long. And I mean, for me, I was in a situation where I was driving for 8 hours a day. So what did I do when I got into this is I spent every waking second in that truck, either on the phone with Sandy, for example, at some points, or some other investors, or listening to podcasts, or taking in information, whatever way I could about real estate. And it wasn't a job. It wasn't a chore. It was a passion, right? So now, being where we are, even 5 years later, there is so much more information out there, free information, than there was when we were looking for it. It's not hard to find. That's all that people have to do. and I would suggest that they listen to your podcast as well, for sure.
Thank you.
Now, how can people get in touch with you? We know where to find the podcast. What about if they actually want to talk to you, the man?
Well, the easiest place is just either on Facebook or Instagram. My handle is at the Andrew Hines. So just TheAndrewHines. That's the easiest way. Just shoot me a message. Also host a monthly meetup here in Burlington. I call it the Greater Hamilton REI Meetup. So if you ever, do want to come out and meet me, meet fellow investors that are in this area, just talk and shop and having a beer. It's a great way to get into the community. And I've made so many great connections just from people who've come out to that meetup.
That's amazing. You have beer at the meetup or after the meetup?
We do it at Nickelbrook Brewery. So remember how I told you the best conversations are in the hallway. Well, we do the whole meetup in the hallway.
Oh, I like that. That's good stuff. Okay. Well, we're going to post all of those links in our show notes. So people will be able to reach out to you. They'll find the information for that meetup you were talking about. And we can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing all this stuff today.
Well, thank you guys. Awesome. You guys are the original pioneers of this. I was listening to your podcast when it was the only one that I could find. And kudos to you for starting it so early.
The Canadian ones anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're the first pioneers.
That makes me sound old.
Keep it up.
We got our pioneers hats in the other room.
I love that. It was great. I think, and also, so much information. You still got to go and get into some FaceTime. I think that's a big thing to remember. Go to some of those meetup clubs. Especially if they have beer and they're.
Yeah, Sandy, come on out, have a beer, man.
Okay, so Sandy, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, where would they do that?
They can call into us 289-389-6846 or sandy@mckayrealtynetwork.com.
And people can reach me at rob@mrbreakthrough.ca, or I'll do the phone number 289-927-0464. And that's it for today. I think I'm going to leave us with one little tip, and it's the biggest thing that I think that I learned from you today, Andrew, and that is that it seems to me like you didn't take no for an answer when you were looking for lending on those hard to do deals. You just kept picking up the phone and calling until you got the answer that you wanted. So that, I think, was my biggest takeaway today. And I advise everybody else to sort of do the same thing. Just because you get a no from one person doesn't mean that, it's over. Keep calling, keep persistent, and make it happen. That's how it gets done.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks.